with Tulsi Gabbard, CNN town hall.
Hey, buddy, this is John.
Okay, I think I'm live. You know, contrasted with John Delaney, she seems a little bit more like a real person. He seems more like a politician. This is a lot more confrontational than the Delaney town hall was. I wonder if Dianne Feinstein inspired her. My screen keeps freezing, so I apologize for the delay. Also for not knowing how to set this up in my home office. So this is a Medicare for All question. It's relatively straightforward answer to the question. And now this will be how you're going to pay for it question, probably from Dana Bash. I don't know what that means. All right, that's sort of a vague question and a vague answer. Labels. This is definitely a much more confrontational approach than John Delaney got. I don't know if I'm even live or I'm just talking to myself here. I'm trying to figure it out, but I haven't seemed to been able to do that. And I'm going to take a break while they take a break to make sure my connection is working. Much as I'd like to watch that. I think there's a Bunny still doing ads. All right, so it says I'm live. It says I've been live, but there's nobody thumbs upping. I'm not getting any response, so I am not sure that I'm live. So Tulsi Gabbard is, it'd be interesting. I was wondering whether, Dana Bash was going to take the same approach as, what was his name, Chuck Todd? No, not Chuck Todd. What's his name before? Jake Tapper, who went before her, who was, he asked follow-up questions, but the follow-up questions weren't really, well, let me make sure I'm getting your real answer on this. Plus the questions now for Tulsi Gabbard are, about hot button issues. Not, I mean, obviously Medicare for all is an important question that everyone's going to get, but they weren't asking. Did Delaney? I don't think he got a single foreign policy question, but that's good for Tulsi Gabbard because that's her defining element, is identifying her as a someone who's going to stand out from the pack on her foreign policy, on her non-interventionist foreign policy, and she's going to oppose the regime change wars that we've been fighting for generations now and keep fighting. And when she was asked, are you not going to believe the intelligence services, and you're not going to believe your own government, and you're not going to believe the UN? And she's like, look, those are the same people who lied us into the Iraq War. That's bold, and I think there are people in the audience who appreciated that. Now we get these questions: are you a socialist? Are you a capitalist? It's preposterous and sort of an inane question, because of course our society has is blended between elements of socialism and elements of capitalism. There's no pure capitalism anywhere. There's no pure socialism anywhere. I mean, and what does that even mean? There are different definitions. So when she says, look, socialist, that's a label. I don't think we need to get involved in these labels. And Dana Batch's like, yeah, well, labels are important. Are you a capitalist? And Tulsi has to say, well, see, I reject the socialist label. I reject the capitalist label also. I'm just independent minded. I try to come up with the best ideas possible. I don't know. Maybe that's sort of the question about how open to the idea of socialism the American electorate, the Democratic electorate, is now, considering it's been, the slurs on socialism have been coming fast and furious since 1917 or before, and but they're maybe not as effective with younger people the way they are people of my generation, who were told that the Ruskies are coming and they're gonna shove socialism down your throat. So I mean, I guess Tulsi Gabbard, she's also coming at the foreign policy questions from the perspective of a veteran. And the first question was, how can you be a vet and also be against intervention? And that mindset is so outlandish if you think about it, because many of the people who are the most ardently anti-war are people who've experienced war and have been there, and they're the ones who say, look, I and my brothers and sisters were sent off to war on a lie, to fight a war against people I had no qualms with, I had no beef with, for somebody else's purposes, not my own, and not anybody I knew and anybody I cared about. And yet there are people who are being killed and killing and dying for this lie. And I know that personally. And the idea that you can't, if you're a soldier, you have to support all military interventions, even ones that haven't been announced yet. It seems a little preposterous, but that is sort of a mindset that we have as Americans. So that's an interesting question that it would be phrased that way. It's a little disheartening. But so Tulsi Gabbard, the Medicare for all question she answered was perfectly fine. It seems like Medicare for all, it's almost like we've gotten to the point where it's a done deal now, and you have to support. I mean, even John Delaney before was supporting a version of Medicare for all, or his own version, and that never would have happened without Bernie, and without back just 2.5 years ago, Hillary Clinton was saying it's a unicorn, and now everybody's talking about it. All right, let's get back to what Tulsi has to say in the next question. She's got better applause lines than Delaney. Okay, so this is where Dana Bash follows up and zings her. Tulsi Gabbard would be the first ever Hindu president of the United States. She's also the first ever Hindu member of Congress. It's interesting that the question on the screen says, has your position on conversion therapy truly changed? When she's saying that she never had an old position on conversion therapy. All right, so these are, I mean, a lot of the questions now, about 50-50 between questions that are sort of generic and then others that are specifically targeted at her perceived weaknesses. All right, so this seems more like a softball for her. Nobody asked John Delaney this question. But I don't think you can hear me. I think this is not going live, but I'm just talking to myself. But we got to keep trans people out of the military. That's the key thing, is keeping trans people out. We don't do anything to help women who are sexually assaulted in the military, really, and stigmatize them, but trans people, they're the real ones we need to keep out. She just said they don't know. What's the upside to reporting? It's all downside. So that's an applause line, but they don't take advantage of it enough. And John Delaney said bold action was carbon offsets, right? All right, they're going to break. I'm gonna turn off the. All right, so there was a question about climate change. It didn't seem like a particularly uh, interesting answer from Tulsi Gabbard. She didn't really talk about the Green New Deal. I mean, she talked about these things that, we want to do these things we want to do, as if there's a consensus. Yeah, sure, the Republicans aren't doing anything about it, and there's a guy get out money out of politics, and we need to work with our allies and develop relationships with them. But how are you going to accomplish that? The question of getting money out of politics, as I said, it's an applause line, and which is encouraging because it's it's sort of frustrating to see so many politicians who aren't willing to go there and say, look, we got to get money out of politics because money, it corrodes our political system, and whether it's the lobbyists or the direct campaign contributions or soft money and PAC money, all these various ways that money, and even if you do get money out of politics in the traditional ways, public financing of elections, it's not like money is going to go away as an influencing factor, but it certainly would be diminished, and it would force the rich and powerful to retrench and figure out a different way to try to go about controlling our lives in every way possible so they can profit off of it. But aren't you a capitalist? Are you going to say you're not a capitalist just because capitalism is destroying the planet that we're hoping to live on? So the answer to it's complicated though. How do you get there? How do you do that? I mean, she also didn't go into any details about what the Green New Deal, or what whether she agrees with the Green New Deal. Maybe that's coming up. Maybe there'll be a question about that later. But it is interesting how she expresses it as if there's a consensus, an agreement that we all want to see these things about sustainability and getting off fossil fuels and there really isn't. And even among Democrats, how are you going to accomplish that? It is nice to see that she can say that as if there is this general consensus, which there wasn't. There hasn't been, much like with Medicare for all. That now, you can't come into this like Hillary Clinton did and say, "Oh, I just want to strengthen the ACA." I mean, I don't know what Joe Biden's position is going to be on Medicare for all or on whatever his healthcare solution is going to be. It's going to be a tough sell for him because he's in the pocket, or has been, as a senator of a pharmaceutical industry, and he's certainly getting money out of politics is not something that Joe Biden is going to have an interest in because he is steeped in the corruption of money in politics. So, how do you address this problem? I don't know. So then, it will be interesting to see how the other candidates respond to these questions about climate change, and that everyone's talking about how we need to be bold. In terms of John Delaney, bold meant carbon offsets and other sort of corporate friendly ideas, and Tulsi Gabbard didn't really go into them in any detail. So we have some idea that she supports the Green New Deal. So she's more ambitious on that front, and she is more progressive. But I will be interesting to see the other candidates and what position they take on this sort of we all agree that we need to take bold action, even though some people maybe they don't really agree. But that suggests progress, and that progress is because of people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, who, if they weren't talking about these things and weren't bringing them up and weren't putting them into the political mainstream, nobody would be talking about them. So, no, not nobody, but they wouldn't be here in the town hall. So overall, I think we've had like a 50-50 between relative softballs and questions that she could answer with it, that weren't based on attacks on her, criticism of her existing record, not necessarily attacks, but criticism of her record, and much as with Bernie, where the questions, these people were plants practically, who they knew were going to ask just those questions that are really going to stick it to Bernie. She's had less of that, but there's been some of that, and much more so than John Delaney, who, on the one hand, you could say, it doesn't matter, he's polling at 0%, and she is doing a little bit better. But you could also say, well, she's more of a threat to the establishment than John Delaney is, so she's going to catch more guff. All right, let's hear what else is going on. What's next? This is a big one. It's fun when they ask questions that they're not used to, they're not expecting. How do you think on your feet? And my screen is frozen, so I don't know what she's going to say. Oh, it's back. It's funny that she's mentioning this because it was only a year ago, and this was like a huge deal, and now we've just forgotten it. The Trump era, it's crazy that we just, the news that comes and goes. Shocking. Y'all. All right, so how do you beat Donald Trump is not that's not really an answer. That's after you beat Donald Trump. All right, this should be a softball for her. Yeah, this was just 3 days ago. It is a bipartisan bill she introduced with Don Young, from a Republican from Alaska. All right, so she won't commit to complete decriminalization, which probably isn't surprising. But I'd be interested to know what her position is, although we didn't really hear it. Hillary Clinton? No. All right. So Tulsi's done, and so am I. I don't think you saw me because I think I messed up my live stream. But if you are hearing this, I can give you a couple of thoughts on recapping. So this was more confrontational, as I pointed out, than the Delaney town hall earlier. But it also gave Tulsi Gabbard an opportunity to talk directly to an audience instead of having everything filtered through the mainstream media questions about how she's an Assad apologist or how she is soft on gay rights and is a recent convert. So I'm interested to know what people think about how she performed. And when she does have, one thing that's interesting about her is she has this military background. She served in that she was a member of the National Guard in Hawaii. And then her unit, I think a portion of her unit was called up. She didn't have to go. I'm not sure if it's because she was on the city council in Honolulu or because only a portion of her unit was called. I don't know the details on that. But she chose to go and wound up serving 2 tours, and she gave up her city council seat and then came back and ran for office again after that, and successful, obviously. But I think that this is her strength, her being a veteran, because that inoculates you, depending on who you are. But if you're like John McCain, it inoculates you and allows you to pursue warmongering policies. But she's a vet who is pursuing anti-imperialist policies. She wants to end our foreign wars or end our regime change wars. And it'll be interesting to see, because we have a mainstream news media and elite establishment that is almost entirely pro-war. There weren't any questions about Venezuela, which I was disappointed, because I would like to have her provide her contrary thoughts on Venezuela compared to what the rest of the media, virtually lockstep, are talking about regime change and supporting regime change. Whether it's it may not be to say we don't want to send in the military, but Maduro's got to go and all that sort of thing. So it's too bad that we didn't hear about Venezuela. But as a candidate, is that actually going to be turned into her weakness, the way it was with John Kerry? Are people going to attack her? How can she be a vet? And that's what the first question was sort of getting at. How can she be a vet and not support the troops, where supporting the troops means always supporting all of our wars? I'm a fan of Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know if you could see me. I don't know if I messed this whole stream up. If I did, I am not apologizing to anybody. And if I didn't, and you can hear me, then I'm apologizing for all the explanation. Next, Brett is going to come up and talk about Pete Buttigieg, whose name I don't know 100% how to pronounce. But it should be more interesting, certainly, than Delaney, who was sort of milquetoasty and sort of a corporatist guy. And but an interesting contrast with Tulsi Gabbard as well, because she's from Hawaii, she's a woman, she's a vet. He is Midwestern mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So it'll be interesting to see, and I'm going to tune in and find out myself. But if you caught this and it was useful at all to you, I'm glad. And thanks for tuning in. And now let's just we'll check in on Brett and see what he has to say about Mayor Pete. All right. Thank you. Bye.